The restoration industry is under siege. Sales are soft, margins are razor thin, getting paid feels like pulling teeth. This is a wartime environment, and restoration leaders need battle-tested tactics that work when everything's on the line. You're listening to Mission Critical, the podcast where the industry's elite operators share the systems, strategies, and scars from the trenches. I'm Leighton Heeley, the CEO of Know-How, and we spotlight restorers who refuse to go quietly into the night. My guest today, Jamar Plater, COO of Thomasville Restoration, one of the top restoration providers in the Mid-Atlantic. Jamar is one of those operators who makes radical transparency work. Case in point, when Thomasville expanded into Richmond, 100 miles from home base, Jamar didn't try to solve the operational puzzle alone. He communicated the goal to the entire company. Here's the challenge. Here's the goal. And all of a sudden, mitigation techs raised their hands to help. People volunteered to relocate. Their network solved what the C-suite couldn't do alone, thanks to transparency and effective communication. Jamar also runs a problem-solving framework called LEAST. LEAST: listen, empathize, apologize, solve, and thank, and then teaches it to his team so problems don't roll uphill. Plus, he's the operator who asks customers if he can use their feedback as a training example for his staff. This conversation gets into the daily KPIs that Jamar tracks, how radical transparency turns teams into problem solvers, and how Thomasville turned shared values into an engine that powers everything else. So let's get into it.
Folks, I'm here with someone who I have a lot of respect for, is my friend Jamar. And Jamar, can I say this? COO at Thomasville Restoration?
Sure thing. Just recently happened.
Yeah.
I'm excited that they chose me for that position. I'm looking forward to some great things that Thomasville is going to do in the future.
Yeah, I agree. No, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of yours, a big fan of your team. And look, right now, the industry, I would say it's in turbulent times. And it's in turbulent times, particularly for a lot of companies where they're experiencing a lot of compression around the sources of the jobs that are coming in, and they're feeling squeezed on material costs and whatnot. And one of the things that I think it's an old proverb, which is calm seas don't make great sailors, or some version of that. And so at the same time as there is a lot of turbulence, it's really, in my opinion, highlighting the need for strong, very tactical operational leadership. And so your name came to mind when I was thinking, if we could get a whole bunch of restorers in a room who are probably really feeling a lot of anxiety right now, and we were to just get around a coffee table and sit down, who would we want to put at the head of the table and just say, look, guys, this is how you get your team through this difficult period. And you were one of the guys that was top of my list. Excited to jump into some of your playbook.
All right, let's do it.
So right out of the gates, and this might be a bit of a curveball here, but you recently were promoted to COO, Chief Operating Officer at Thomasville, probably the top operating Mid-Atlantic restoration provider. Why do you think you were promoted? Because I have some reasons why I think that you were like hands down the right man for the job. But why do you think you were promoted?
Wow. You say you come out with the curveball right at the beginning. To be honest, in my heart, to do the work of that COO, right? And my understanding of a COO position is the executive team for the C-suite has a vision of where the company is going. Then they have strategic plans on how to get there. And the question is, do we have the people to actually produce what those plans are calling for, right? And how do we make sure, as we're developing those operational plans to attack those strategic goals, are we making sure that we don't lose who we are in that growth process, right? Do we keep the same culture? And two, do we keep our values? And so I'm making sure that my team, when we're creating those operational plans, that our values are coming forth, like helping families put their homes and lives back together, family first, compassion, communication. And then so I'm sitting in two meetings, right? So I'm sitting in a meeting with the top brands, but I'm also sitting in the meeting with the actual people who make the sausage and the nuts and bolts. And I'm holding both sides accountable. I'm questioning some of these strategic plans and goals, and some of those meetings are challenging, but I'm holding everybody to the same standard. Are we fulfilling our vision and mission? And are we holding on to our values? And I think that's the reason why they promoted me to that position, because I'm just not afraid to challenge the leadership team, because I feel like we were going to build something special here.
So right now, I find that this is the climate, a tough market that I find really challenges organizations, whether their values actually have any substance, whether they're like fair weather values, or whether they're actually these true North Stars that are guiding a ship through the storm. Why do you think, what would lead a company, or say a leadership team, push their values to the side, muscle through this hard time, and maybe return to them later? And why would you say that's not happening at Thomasville?
I don't believe it's happening at Thomasville. One, because we have an offsite, which you came to one of them and did an excellent job. In my first offsite, the discussion was, we as a company are going to finalize and come up with our value. Everyone, and no one has a more powerful vote than the other person. So the technician's vote weighed the same as the owner's vote. And it started off 10, and then we whittled it down to 5, and then we voted, and then we said, these are the 3. This is what reflects us, right? And so we all were bought in on these values. And we realized that it wasn't really about the money or really about actually what we were doing. It was really just, it's a bunch of people with the same values. And whether we open up a hot dog stand or whether we go out and help families who have experienced the loss, we're going to do it together, and we're going to hold on to these values. And we may go out of business, but we're not going to lose our values. And then we were just hoping. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Maybe think about one thing that my team probably too often I'll say, look, there's only 2 constants in this business. Things are going to change, and we're going to do things according to our values. And so it's just plan for it. And I don't know if they sound like they're at odds with each other, but maybe that's one of the reasons why, I resonate so well with what you and your team are building. Is a very similar philosophy is at the root of what we're focused on.
I was thinking the exact same thing. What we found out is that people chose us not because we were the cheapest, and people chose us not because we were the fastest, and we were working to grow to be the best, and we were looking forward to that. But they chose us because we were just being genuine. If we made a mistake, we owned up to it, right? No matter how someone treated us, we were going to hold on to our values. And then this strange thing started happening. People started gravitating towards the company based on the values. We didn't have to necessarily recruit. People just started saying, I want to be a part of Thomasville. Then we start running into strategic partners like yourself. And then when you start to see yourself and someone else, I remember when we first met you, Leighton, we was working on processes, and then it wasn't quite the right fit, because we were already doing stuff and you were offering one thing, and we had Jen, he was already doing it, but we knew this person has the same values as we do. And somehow we're going to meet up with them later in the future, and it's going to be a partnership. And same thing with our vendors, same thing with our adjusters. Same thing with repeat homeowners. People just attracted to you because they feel a safety and security. And that's a rare thing these days because we're fighting against the narrative of the contractor is out to get the customer. We have an interesting dynamic where we have one owner, Andy, he's the finance guy, right? His background history is a CFO. And then we have another owner in Tom who he doesn't care if we make a dime. His goal is we're going to help this customer. And I understand that. We also got to be able to make sure we can help the next customer too, right? And not lose our shirt. So that interesting dynamic I think it helps with the secret sauce of Thomas.
So tell me, I just want to zoom in on the person who's probably going to be listening to this conversation. And right now in the industry, this is not an isolated situation. A person could listen to this conversation anytime, but there is some real turbulence in the industry, like I mentioned earlier. And a lot of leaders and a lot of managers are really experiencing the pressure of their team looking to them for guidance, looking for them to be able to give them direction in how to be able to navigate through just this stressful time. And so I want to go through just some topics with you, Jamar,
Okay.
because I would love to give an opportunity of just how do you think about things? Because tactically, you and your team have established a very rich and very thick culture. You have placed in this democratic approach, you've placed these values almost like these kind of nuclear engines at the center of your business that's influencing all of your decisions, and it's having this magnetic effect, which is really interesting. When I think about values, one of the things why I'm just so all in on shared values is because business moves at the speed of trust. And it's so much easier to do business when you can trust someone. You can trust that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. You can trust that things are going to be done the right when you are there. And sometimes I think about my background, all my family were farmers, and they're generally family operations because you can trust family. Because if you got to sit at the dinner table together and look at each other, you got to be able to say, hey, I got to get this done because the person across the table from me reaching for that dinner roll is going to ask me, did I do things the right way? So let's get into it. So thinking about even just this year, we're the middle of the year, what would you say has been the toughest operational challenge that you've had to tackle this year? And just walk us through what happened and how you approach operational challenges, Jamar.
Wow. So I guess one of our most recent operational challenges was geographic growth. And so we are expanding. We're Baltimore based. And
Yeah, I've learned.
I think you got it down, Baltimore based. And
Yeah,
and
Baltimore. I'm still working on that one. Yeah.
and we expanded up into Philly, New Jersey area, and then now we expanded into Richmond. And the easier challenge to service customers as far as on the reconstruction side, but the operational challenge is how do we service the mitigation, the contents, because those areas are 100 miles away from the home base office. If I have a project concierge and an estimator, they usually live in that area. So they grew up with the folks that they're servicing. The mitigation has to be serviced from Baltimore. So our challenge is how do we bring those services to those areas without losing the Thomasville touch, without losing the speed of service, without losing the ability to be able to service the customer the way they're supposed to be served. And not cut corners, right? That's the last thing you want to do is say, I did that because it was so far away, so I had to cut corners. That's the last thing we want to do. So that challenge was put before us. And one thing that we said as a team was we're going to solve this issue because the customers in Richmond need us. But we're going to solve it very strategically. So we're actually opening up on the 9th for reconstruction. And then we communicated our goals to the rest of the team, right? So we said, it's one thing that the leadership team knows about these goals and our concerns. Let's communicate this to the whole company because we have 150 employees. All of a sudden, a network of employees started saying, hey, raising their hand. I'll move down there. I'm on the mitigation side. Oh, I know somebody down there. I know an estimator down there. What we realized is that we had a wealth of people who wanted to help us with our goal just because we communicated that goal. And as leaders, we feel like we have to solve all of questions and have all of the answers. When we don't, we just need to be able to communicate the right questions. Who can help us reach our goal? I think, and that's what we found out that our network is bigger than just the decision makers that come into a room on a Thursday or a Friday.
Do you find it's interesting? So I can certainly relate to that, where I think sometimes either because of ego or because of just the pressure of a situation or the stress of a situation, a leader or a leadership team can really feel this sense that I will identify the big obstacles, I'll come up with a solution, and then I'll present it to the team, and we'll save the day together. And what you're saying is actually what we have a practice of doing is share with the team, hey, these are our priorities, these are our goals, but also these are some of the obstacles we need to overcome. And you enlist your entire organization in solving that problem. And so I'm just thinking about someone who's having a difficult year operating, feeling the pressure to have all the answers, not share anything with their team, just be the savior, so to speak. What's your advice to that person?
Reach out to not only your team, your staff, your employees, your family. Your employees are your family, but reach out to your network that you work with, whether it's the contents guy or the plumber down the street. They have answers and to me, people are put in your life for a specific reason, and you got to take off that crown or that shirt of pride and say, hey guys, I need some help, right? And this is what I'm faced with. And can you help me out? And I'm telling you, 10 times out of 10, people are willing to say, hey, have you tried this, right? Or have you tried that? Or I'm willing to work a little bit extra. The issue is I don't have anybody to cover phones on a Saturday. We have people volunteer to say, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm not doing anything on this weekend. I'll cover it. As long as you communicate to them and be honest with them. The last thing that people want is for you to be hiding things, and then because they're going to say, why didn't you just tell me? One big thing that really I truly appreciate at Thomasville is that we are very transparent, right? And that transparency has helped us so that people don't feel like, is the company going to go under tomorrow? Or are we saying we're moving here, but then we're moving someplace else? We are very transparent with the team. And because we are, it's allowing the team to be able to communicate, not just communication going one way, but communication is actually coming to us. Now, the thing about us, I mean, I could pull my earphones off and you can see I got big ears. So my mom told me to use them, right? But, and I know that this isn't supposed to be a plug for know-how, but that has been a game changer, because the people who are out in the field are able to not only access the processes and the how-tos that we're trying to standardize, but then they can look at it and say, hey, I do this every day and I found a more efficient way. And then they can send that information back to us. We can evaluate it as a leadership team and then implement it across the whole platform. It's been a game changer. If you haven't jumped on it, you need to jump on it. That was another initiative that we kicked in this year. We called it March into Know-How.
March into Know-How.
And it was in the month of March.
Yeah, I want people to August into Know-How.
August
right
into
now,
Know-How.
man.
Yeah. But we had to make sure
I hear
that
you.
that the whole team was on board. You can't just have one department, because there's always one department that says, I'm done, but we needed everybody to do it. We made an initiative and we said, Martin, know how we doing nothing else but making sure we get these processes in. And it's been such a game changer, because little did we know that we grew so fast, and we had a lot of onboarding over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And some of that onboarding was staff that's in other countries. And they are like, wow, we're not sending them SharePoint, or we're not sending them binders. They were just able to access it at any time of the day. And a lot of times they get in front of it. And they've actually, since they have access to it, they're reaching in and understanding the other departments, their processes and how-tos, and they've been able to help us out. So it's been definitely a game changer. We thank you for that.
Oh, hey, there's a whole team behind that. So I'll pop that in the old pocket, and I'll carry that bag. So that's me to say. One of the things that I'm hearing you unpack is like parts of how you solve problems, Jamar. Because if there's one thing that is consistent, is that as you grow and as you move forward as a business, you encounter problems, challenges. Would you say that you have a methodology for how you think about approaching and tackling problems? Because I think that it's so easy to really just kind of just like wing it every day. You know what I'm saying? So how do you think about problems? If I'm someone on your team and you're trying to develop me to be able to tackle some obstacles independently, and I just put this question to you, I'm like, how do you approach problems?
For me, like you said, you think that you want to wing it, but what happens is that works when it's one problem or two problems. But then when the problems start to build up, if you don't have a process, or if you, what I like to call it, a tool, right? Then it becomes just overwhelming. I used a tool. I think back to my first day on the job. Tom was like, here's your binder. Here's your business cards. He's like, read over that. And then day 2, he comes in with the catbird smile, and he goes, I have this customer that I want you to call. Is issue resolution. From that point on, I just was dealing with problem solving, issue resolutions. But one tool that I picked up in my earlier career was I used a tool called LEAST, which was listen, empathize, apologize, solve the problem, thank the customer. And it was a tool that I used to just keep me focused, right? Because I needed to listen to the customer, because 90% of the customers, when they're calling you, it's a problem because they don't feel like they're being heard. And so when I call a customer up, or if I'm trying to solve a problem, I'm really listening to what they're saying behind even their words, right? Because they're trying to communicate, they're frustrated. I'm listening. And if you're trying to listen beyond the words, their body language, their situation, then you begin to empathize. And the first thing you want to do is just apologize, not necessarily for what did we do something wrong, or did they do something wrong. It's really apologize for them to be in that situation, right? Because the feeling is real. They feel like they're not heard. And then I try my best to solve it. And then I thank them for the feedback, because guess what? That feedback, whether positive or negative, it helps us become better, right? Those winds, those rough seas, as you talk about, that make the great sailors. And I actually then tell the customer to say, hey, once we solve this problem, we're going to solve it. Can I use your example? Because I'm going to be speaking in front of 40 and 50 of their teammates. Can I use your example to help them be better? And then I ask the customers, is there anything that you would like for me to tell them while I'm up there? And it just blows their mind, right? And says, oh, yeah, great. Just tell them this. And then I realized that I can't hold that tool myself. So after I explain that to them, then I give the teammates the tool. Hey guys, let's do some role play. Let's do some examples. Problem comes in. Listen, the more people on your team that know how to solve problems and listen and empathize, the less it's going to roll uphill and get to me. And so I try to not only solve the issue and solve problems, but I also try to teach the folks how to fish and solve them themselves. And ultimately, I'm teaching them to be better leaders, not just estimators and project managers. So those are probably my go-tos on how to solve problems. And then I've just recently pivoted that to even when we have challenges and operational growth, right? So if I see something failing or process failing, I try to listen, what's really going on here? And I don't get in my feelings about help build this process, right? And so it's going to stay here. And so I'm listening to what everybody else is saying, how it's affecting them, empathizing with them, apologizing that I didn't see it from their perspective, probably solve the problem. And now I think I'm in the company elevates and become better for it.
What do you think, Jamar, is something that I would love to better understand is when I spend time with you and your team, there's like this interesting kind of balance between, I just find your team has this humility to listen, and in service of where you're trying to go, you are quite flexible. And yet your team has this kind of swagger and confidence that people would often associate with, frankly, the kind of a, let's call it an ego that wouldn't be flexible and accommodating. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What do you think's going on there? Because I think if people spend some time with your team, say at a conference or an event, they'd probably say this team has some real swagger. And then if you were to listen to this podcast and you're saying, hey, the head of all operations is saying, listen to your team, take a service orientation to customers, thank them for painful feedback sometimes, use opportunities for team members to solicit feedback on optimizations of process. There's a term it's not my term, this don't have sacred cows, meaning we can't touch that because I built that back in the day. It was perfect then. So how do you balance this kind of confidence and swagger with this kind of service-oriented humility? Because I think it's a defining characteristic of your team.
Yeah, and I guess that's what we would define as our culture, right? And it's so fragile, right? It's when you're in it and you're part of it, you're very protective of it, right? We have interviews where the process of our interviews, we have sometimes I remember my first interview, it was 5 hours and it was on Teams. And the whole point was Andy instilled in everyone that if we get more than just own perspective and feed on a person, and everybody gives the thumbs up, now everybody's on board with that person being part of the team. And we're going to support that person. We're going to do whatever. Can't sit there and say, no, I didn't hire him. That was your person. You said, we all agreed to this person being a part of the team. And then it was like a flywheel or a snowball effect that we started to see that even the department heads were interviewing technicians and they would ask me, hey, Jamar, would you sit in on this meeting for a technician? And Andy would ask me, what are you doing today? I'm like, I'm interviewing a tech. He would ask me, can I sit in on it? And these techs are looking and saying, the CEO and the general manager, and like, they had never met these folks. And Andy, he was so humble. He was such a genius in what he did with business. But when I walked in the door, he said, I don't know a thing about this restoration business. And he was so humble and he was like, I'm going to learn it. I'm going to get my WRT. And he said, I'm going to get the people around me. I'm not afraid to hire people smarter than me. So then we started investing in Kathy, who's the contents, and Tony, who's mitigation, and Josh and Jen. And so once we started to get this core team together, and then we all aligned on a vision. I can't say that enough. Our vision initially was to be the #1 restoration company in the Mid-Atlantic. And to me, it sounds like we want to be better than everyone. But what I heard when vision was presented to me is that I want to build a company where everybody wants to come and work for. And we're going to put some swag behind it. And we're going to wear these shirts down. It wasn't like we felt we were better. We just felt, guess what? We're all better. We want to elevate everyone. So it was really like a recruiting. Like when you come down, Leighton, and we see you and like we don't want you to leave, we're secretly recruiting you. We're like, we need Leighton to be a part of the team. So the swag is like, we
Yeah,
can get
man.
Leighton, we'll be even better and we can elevate even more. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's why we're doing this thing. And like, we want to grow it and we want everybody to be a part of it. And then we just tell everybody like on the team, be careful because these moments are rare and you don't want to look back at it. Let's keep the vision in front of us because at the end of the day, I want to be sitting on the porch with you 20 years from now, whether it's in Canada or you come down here to Maryland and saying, let's drink this lemonade and let's talk about the days. We're not going to talk about the numbers. We're going to talk about these interviews. Yeah. And when you came down and we were trying to teach you Baltimore, those are the things that makes this thing infectious. And we try to celebrate those things and we try to take them lightly because those will be the only things that we remember at the end of the day. And so that, I guess that hopefully I answered.
It did. No, you know what? It's what I hear you saying is at the end of the day, I think what I'm hearing you say is there is, let's call it a confidence that's the byproduct of a culture of humility. And in my opinion, what is ego? In many ways, ego is sometimes the dark side of confidence. There's a book that I often return to, written by a gentleman named Tim Keller called The Secret of Self-Forgetfulness. And it talks about how easy it is for us to become obsessed with how we're perceived or how we come off or have we done anything special recently. And he talks about really our natural state. We're supposed to think about how we're perceived about as much as we think about our toes, so to speak. Yeah. And you're like, how often do you think about your toes throughout the day? Not at all, right? Mm-hmm. But the natural byproduct of probably just healthy, rooted, aligned confidence, I think can really come off as, maybe a bit of an arrogance, but all you have to do is look at a sports team that's winning, that has a winning program. Yeah. And there is something electric about being in that dressing room. Yeah. When you know that you have a great chemistry as a team. Exactly. But let's talk about you, Jamar. Let's talk about you because I want to go for it.
The excitement is it's the team that's in the room, the leadership team in the room. But the excitement that we have is really the next level down, right? We know that strength is there, right? And so and we're not scared to teach them everything we know because we're excited. And when I sit in those meetings and those interviews, I'm not hiring estimators and technicians. When you're hiring people with core values, you're hiring the next leader, right? So you're not afraid to pour in everything that you know into that person. And look, I want you to take my job. Vision of building the company to be the number one restoration company, and then now to being the number one most trusted and respected, outweighs me sitting in this chair, right? And so I'm willing to dump everything that I'm possible, and I'm not afraid to hire people that's better than me. And so that confidence comes because it's like, even if I don't have all the answers, we're going to build a culture where we find the people who can give us those answers. And we're excited about that. And if they take my job and I now have to work for that person, guess what? No problem, because I hired this person as a leader anyway. I'm looking at him. I'm like, I could work for this technician one day. So that's the excitement that comes with that.
So let me ask you this. A lot of conversation around some of the things that are characteristic of your team, but I want to talk about you for a moment. So this is going to be a rocket round, Jamar round here. So in your role, lots of moving parts. I just think about the rocket ship dashboard that is probably, I don't even want to ask how many emails you're probably CC'd on and whatnot, but I'm just curious, when you get to the office in the morning, what's the first KPI that you look at and why?
If my first KPI would be, I look at the estimator pipeline, and then I look at my reconstruction pipeline. And the reason why I look at that is I want to see how many claims have come in for that day, and then also how many have come in that week. And then I'm looking to see the ones that did come in, have they been inspected? How far are we out on inspections? And then next thing you know, I'm looking how have we uploaded, right? Those estimates. And so what we do is we have a great finance team, which has built pipeline where I can see where every job is, whether it's in the 1 to 2 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, 5 to 6, 8 weeks. And we look to see if it's in an 8-week bucket, has anybody touched it? Are there notes on this 8-week bucket? Is it waiting because it's asbestos? Is a customer just called us back? And then I reach out to the head of estimating, Scott Ruane. And I think if I have some questions, we go over that report. Same thing on the reconstruction side. I'm actually looking at weeks worth of billing left. So each one of our project concierges have a certain amount of billing that they have to do each week. And so we base that billing, let's say it's $30,000. And if they have 180,000 left to bill, they have 6 weeks worth of billing left. They have 6 weeks worth of work left. If I look up and they only have 1 to 2 weeks, and they're not meeting their billing numbers, now I understand. So now my question is to the estimators, we got to get these guys work. But if they have 6 to 8 weeks, they have a healthy amount. And so what we try to do is we try to make sure that that balance is there and that it's visible from 30,000 feet. And we know that I don't want people to be struggling, and those numbers do tell a story. So those KPIs are what I look at every day. And it's been very helpful. And all the leadership team looks at it.
So for you, it's interesting. We spent, let's call it the initial part of this conversation talking about aspects of the business that are, let's call it maybe a little more abstract. And then very quickly, we shift into very tactical, right? As you're explaining that, I can just see you're visualizing this, something that's very routine in your mind. And you're talking about even the conversations that you're having on a daily basis because you familiarize yourself with optimal ratios to think about. You made a comment earlier in our conversation here around how important it is for you to think about. I said, why do you think you got promoted for the role? And you're like, I think essentially you said, I think a lot about the team and whether we deliver what we promise and whether we deliver what we commit to, and even how you solve problems are very people centric. And so beyond KPIs, someone in your role has to bring a level of kind of, let's call it stability in the organization. What, even just for you, like what are some habits or some personal things that you do, Jamar, that you would say contribute to your ability to just show up every day and just be a consistent, reliable, dependable person? Like, how do you sustain yourself?
It's funny. I was asked that question yesterday. We were at our leadership retreat and everybody asked me the same question. And to be honest with you, sometimes this job can be very stressful and very emotional because it's hard not to take this type of work personal, right? And for me, my number one thing that keeps me grounded, Leighton, is my faith. When I am reading that Bible and praying and meditating, and then I start, and then next thing you know, I move to making sure I have my routine of exercise, right? Because with the faith and the exercise, it gives me a bigger picture and perspective on things. It refocuses me back to the vision that I'm trying to build something bigger than myself, right? Same thing with my marriage with my wife, right? Like when I got married, it no longer was about me. I'm trying to build something bigger, my family. So it doesn't matter if it gets tough. Me and my wife have agreed to do something bigger than ourselves. And then that becomes an example for somebody else to be able to aspire to say, to do that as well. And I can tell every time when I'm not grounded in my faith, I literally just start to lose it. And then I just start doing everything. And Chick-fil-A starts to, I don't care how long the line is, I'm eating Chick-fil-A. But once I get grounded, I'm able to come back. And then people are looking at me and they're saying, why are you so calm when everything is so crazy? And I'm like, I'm not worried. That the thing about it is that I tell everybody this all the time. It's like, why didn't God make just enough air for Adam and Eve? He made enough all the way for me. So we're not going to run out of anything, and I'm not going to run out of work. So I just make sure that I'm in the right mind to be able to do the work that's provided to me. So that's a little bit behind why I'm able to get up every day. And
1 second here, Jamar. I think I lost my audio. Sorry, Jamar. Let me see what's
no
going on.
worries.
My worries. Okay, I'm back. So I caught, you know what? Hey, I caught everything you were saying, but I think I took off my headphones and I may have distracted. But unpacking these, let's call it these. I feel like what you've done is almost you've kind of showed, okay, what are these kind of deep underground pools of water that your life pulls upon, and it's great to hear we even have more in common. I think it's the very first opening part of Proverbs. It talks about a man who lays down roots that go deep, so that when, you know, all of the different, let's call it storms of life and the heat of life, a person stays in fruit, so to speak. A person stays vibrant.
Wow.
And because there's a depth to what they are as a person, right?
Yeah.
Which is what I think what you're saying.
Yeah.
With the time that we have left, I would love to be able to just almost put some questions to you that I think that a lot of operators right now probably have. And you've already spoken to some of them. Give me just kind of your, let's call it your gut reaction.
Okay.
So the first question is a lot of people right now have to find pockets of margin. And so if you were to be brought into a business as an advisor or as a consultant or even just brought in to help, and you were to say, Jamar, we need to find 10% more margin on our projects, where would you look and what would you advise them?
I would do the same thing I do when I'm at home, right? A lot of times I look at my own budget and I'm like, I need 5, 10 to 15% here. And the last thing I can do, I can't lay off my son. I can't tell him to eat 10% less, right? The first thing I do at the partners I've been loyal with for years, cable company, my electric company and insurance company, and say, hey, look, guys, I've been loyal. Is there anything out there where I can save? And so I reach out to them first. And then I look to see if there's any waste on my end, right? What am I being wasteful for? Do I have when was the last time I used Hulu? And do I have stuff that I'm being wasteful for? And then I look in the refrigerator also to see in the pantry, am I buying stuff that's sitting on the shelves and then is expiring? And so same thing, these operators, I would do the same thing. Reach out to people who you work with and challenge them to say, hey, look, I'm trying to leverage our relationship. I'm going to be moving forward in the future with you. I'm loyal. Can you work with me a little bit? Same thing. Look on your inventory on your shelf. What's been on the shelf? And maybe you ordered too much poly, right? And that's been sitting on your shelves. Make sure your inventory, your order is correct. And then also communicate that to the team, that the culture, like we're going to be in a cost saving culture, right? Everybody make sure we stay on budget. Don't treat money like it's monopoly money, right? This is real money, real dollars. Double check when you spend. And I do the same thing at home with the family. If we're going to go somewhere, we can go to the steakhouse, but we're going to go to the steakhouse when it's buy one steak, get one steak free on Tuesday, right? So you just got to be cost conscious.
It's interesting. There was this, I live in Canada and our politics aren't nearly as exciting as yours. But we have a politician that, frankly, I was hoping would get in, but he didn't get selected. And part of his task was we have to balance the budget. We have to balance the budget. And I think one of the things that resonated with me was him talking about we have to create this culture that we are in a phase of having to, in a sense, do without so that we can essentially kind of get through this period of time. And I think that there's a lot of substance to what you're saying, Jamar, because for a lot of companies that I think are going through a rough patch, I have the advantage of having participated, as you mentioned, in one of your offsites where you unpack the financials to the company, which is, I think, is just such tremendous practice. And so you're very transparent about where the company's at. Most businesses, that's very secretive, right? It's very secretive about how we're doing financially. We're very secretive about what challenges and problems we're approaching. And so fundamentally, the idea of also being transparent that we're going through a period of compression and of contraction around budgetary, say, tightening, again, if we keep all that to ourselves, it really just, I think, begins to send off these really strange signals to our team. If someone just tuning into our conversation, Jamar, is coming from a place where they have been pretty secretive, like they've kept their financials from the team for whatever reason, they haven't done a good job really giving the team a sense of really what is the, let's call it the dynamic of the market right now. They have to learn how to communicate in a way that's a little bit more transparent. Where would that person start? Because your team has been making a practice of this, and I think that you do a very good job of it. But where do you even start if you've been secretive for such a long time and now you need to bring your team in on the reality of the situation?
I think you start with communicating to them company goals, right? So we can't discuss revenue until we discuss how we're going to get to that revenue, right? So we have company goals. And so we align on the fact that, let's say the company that your gross margin or your gross profit goals are, let's say 45, 50%, right? And then you explain to the person the why and the how, why we need these numbers, because we need these numbers to come in at this, because guess what? I don't want you going out to a customer's house with a van that's leaking oil, and I don't want you having tools that don't work. I need those numbers below those numbers. I need those indirect costs and those indirect numbers so I can make sure that you go out there and you feel good and the customer has a great experience. And at the end of the day, guess what? The company is going to make Y, right? So here's X, the company is going to make Y, and then we're going to take this money and we're going to invest to win next year, right? Because these are our financial goals. The more we can get the team to understand how one concierge, I need you to produce X dollars because your X dollars is now contributing to the bottom line Y. And this Y is being invested in Christmas parties, in training, in the vehicles, in advertising, in branding. And the owners, which I'm pretty sure most owners are doing out there, they need to realize that, like, when it's tight at my house, me and my wife are the last ones to eat, right? I'm not eating and then telling my son to take a hair or pay cut, right? I'm sitting there evaluating, do I need that Starbucks coffee? I'm sitting there making my sandwiches and buying, instead of individual bag chips, I'm buying the bag chips in some foldable bags, right? And taking them in brown paper bags. And I don't even know, and then removing the opportunity to even splurge. I don't even have DoorDash, right? Because I can't afford it. And so the team, I guess the leaders and the owners of the business have to look and say, hey, let me eat last. And I'm pretty sure some of them are doing that. But if you can be transparent, people will appreciate that genuineness and they will help you reach that goal. I believe so. It's worked for us, and you can see it at the offsites. After every offsite, we always talk to the newer employees who it's their first time, and we ask them, so what'd you think? Their minds are blown. They're like, I've never been a part of a company who was this transparent. And what you're afraid of is you're like, if they know how much we're going to make, then they're going to ask for more money. Oh, no, that's not the case. When they know how much the company needs, they make sure they do their part so that we reach that goal. Because I'm not just celebrating. We all celebrate that we reach that goal. So be transparent and don't be afraid of it.
It's interesting that it's a common adage, but it's rooted in a person's faith, is that when people say the truth will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of business owners, so there's some applicability to that. I think that the emphasis of that statement initially was to recognize how, say, not hiding behind a lie or a deceit or some not. But I've also found the same is true when people say that the truth will set you free, is that one of the things that I find shame and fear one of the side effects of shame and fear is this sense that if you're honest with someone, if you really let somebody know how things are going, that they will reject you, leave you, get mad at you. And sometimes that happens. But by and large, I think that people respond with, I would say, demonstrations of honesty with gratefulness and openness. And I can't remember if you were there when I shared this, Jamar, but I'll say it again, is that having had the privilege of being at one of your company offsites, I made the comment, it might have been just to Jen or to Alexis, was if you ever want to find a way to pay for your offsites, you should just set bleachers along the side and sell tickets to your offsites.
We said that at the last meeting. We said, Tom, he remembers everything. He said, Leighton said, sell tickets.
Yeah, man, I believe it. Jamar, thank you for taking time to share just honestly some of the things that there's so much more we could delve into, but I'm not going to hold you down for another 5-hour interview. But I'll leave that to Andy and Tom, but I just so appreciate you being willing to share some of what you do. I think that this is going to have a lot of positive impact, and I just look forward to the next time we get to kick it and hang out and swap notes. But in the meantime, just keep up the great work, and I'm one of your fans, so thanks for your time today.
Special thanks to Jamar Plater for showing what operational leadership looks like when you build on a foundation of shared trust, not control. His playbook is deceptively simple. Share the numbers, trust your people, teach them to solve problems before they escalate. That's how transparency becomes a competitive advantage. The market is brutal right now, but operators like Jamar and companies like Thomasville show how you can navigate it with values that hold and a team that trusts you enough to follow you through the storm. Thanks for listening to Mission Critical. We'll see you in the next episode.